gone. All right, again, we'll be starting the webinar shortly, and we're just letting in people in from the waiting room. All right, Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hello. So I'm Leslie Peabody from WOW, and as a C2HR board member, I want to invite you to join me and 500 industry HR colleagues at the upcoming virtual C2HR Con on August 9th through the 11th. This can't miss event will be focused on the convergence of culture, change, and innovation. It's a great way to earn continuing education credits from HRCI and SHRM and gain insight into the future of work from HR experts and thought leaders. Best of all, you get to participate in 12 sessions for just $225 for C2HR members. Details and online registration are available at c2hr.org. We're able to offer free quality educational programs to our members like today's webinar, thanks to the generous support of our sponsors. We extend a special thanks to Partners International for partnering on today's seminar or webinar. Thank you. And today's program, it will be recorded and available for viewing on demand at c2hr.org. We encourage everyone to share questions in the chat box. And to kick off our webinar, I'd like to introduce Jakin Merrill, who is a senior consultant at Partners International. Jakin, we greatly appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you all so much for being here. What I hope to do today is a couple of things. I want to challenge the way that you're thinking about employee engagement and also challenge kind of what you might be thinking about doing about that. And at the end of this hour, I hope to leave you with kind of a solution that some might think might be just a little bit unconventional to the topic that we're talking about, employee engagement. One that probably you're not used to often hearing from a consultant, and hopefully one that helps you reimagine what you can do with employee engagement. And what I'm going to propose today is not some fancy, high-priced, multi-layered, multi-phased approach to employee engagement. It's really about something as simple that can be summed up in a single word. So how's that for a tease? I spent 20 years working in the television news business, so you're going to have to finish the whole hour to figure out what that word is going to be. So, but that's what I hope to do with today's webinar. So here's what we're going to cover, as you can see there on your screen. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking a little bit about exactly what is employee engagement anyway. We'll talk about the impact that engagement has on productivity, recruiting, retention. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about, okay, so now that we know what it is, how are we going to measure it? And I have some kind of interesting thoughts that I hope to share on that as well. And then we'll talk about actually how do you begin to drive employee engagement. Before I jump into it, what I want to also do is share a little bit about my story. So at the beginning of 2020, when everything in the world was kind of going a little bit crazy, I kind of got caught up into that as well. So my grandmother unexpectedly, I say unexpectedly, she was 94, passed away at the very beginning of April 2020. When I went home to attend her funeral, that was the last time I ever saw my mother alive. She passed away unexpectedly just 2 weeks later. And a year later, almost to the day, my father, I get to call my father, and unexpectedly passed away. And so that's why employee engagement is something that's really, really important to me right now, because, as I was dealing with the grip of, depression and trying to navigate my way through grief, I started to disengage as an employee as well. it was hard to focus. It was hard to find the courage to, sometimes get out of bed and do the work that I knew that I needed to do. And the reason I bring this up is not because I want you to feel sorry for me or for my situation. But I bring this up because I want to make the point that sometimes the things that are causing our employees to disengage aren't always things that are within our control or things that we can even do anything about, right? It could be more about the person than it is an organization. But at the same time, some of the things that we're going to talk about today, no matter what side the disengagement is coming from or who's responsible for it, we're going to talk about some things that can actually help with it. So let's lay out the problem and spend a little bit of time talking about that. Gallup tells us that we have this huge problem on our hands when it comes to employee engagement. And I assume that's probably why you're here today. But as we lay it out on the table, what we know is that about 50% of employees here in the US are not engaged in their work. 16% of employees in our workforce right now are actively disengaged, meaning they're not in a place where they can put much effort in at all, if any. And even when we look at some of the best managed companies in the organization, or some of the best managed companies in the country, still only about 70% of the employees at those really great managed companies are actually engaged in their jobs as well. So what exactly is employee engagement? To understand what we're talking about here, I think we really need to understand what the definition is. And I did just a quick Google search as I was putting together this presentation, and I found about 1,000 of them. I've put a couple of them up on the screen, and we're going to kind of talk through them. And then I'm going to ask for you to share kind of what you're observing about the different definitions that we're going to see here on the screen in just a second. So Gallup defines employee engagement as engaged employees are those who are involved, enthusiastic about, and committed to the work in the workplace. So that's what Gallup says about employee engagement. Here's another one. This one from Quantum Workplace that says, employee engagement is the strength of the mental and emotional connection employees feel towards their places of work. And here's one more from Harvard Business Review. And Harvard says employee engagement represents the energy, effort, and initiative that employees bring into their jobs. So as I share those three different types of definitions about employee engagement, I'd love for you to share in chat, what are some of the things that stand out to you about those definitions? What are similarities that you noticed? What are maybe some differences? Maybe what are some of the most important pieces of the definitions that you heard? So pop those into chat. There are no right or wrong answers here. But I'm wondering, are we starting to see any patterns? Is there anything that really stood out to you? So we heard a lot about, energy. We heard a lot about initiative. We heard a lot about strength, mental and emotional. We also talked a little bit about connectivity. And so when you talk about employee engagement, a lot of times those are the types of words that might come up. I'm seeing that Melissa is putting in chat there. What stands out is that engagement is multidimensional. And I think, truer words were never spoken. There's not just one single thing that, could lead to engagement. There's not one single thing that you can do to kind of fix it, right? There are all these different pieces of this really big, complex jigsaw puzzle that we have to figure out whenever we talk about something like engagement. So how do you know if someone is not engaged at work? What are the things that you might notice about them? Maybe put some of those things in chat. For me, not realizing at first in the throes of grief that I wasn't engaged at work, but I realized I was having trouble concentrating. I was zoning out during meetings. I'm seeing one participant put in the chat, poor attendance. Yeah, so maybe people stop showing up. Poor performance, right? The level of work is starting to go down. Missing meetings, that happened to me more than once. Sometimes just didn't have the energy to show up. And regardless of what an employee situation is, there's something obviously happening for them that's causing them to make some of these decisions, right? So the signs are probably all over the place. In chat, it's saying participators stop participating, stop raising their hands for extra projects. So it sounds like, just from what I'm seeing in the chat, that you're seeing some of this even in your own workforces as well. So hopefully we'll be able to look at what we can do to get a handle on it. But let's look at the opposite side of disengaged employees. What we do know about employees that are engaged is that there is a 21% increase in productivity from employees that say that they are engaged in the work that they're doing. We also know that companies that have more engaged employees have better retention rates. Employees are more likely to stay within an organization, more likely to feel stronger bonds to that organization's mission and purpose. And get this, employees that are more engaged with their workplace or their organization are actually champions of recruitment, right? They actually help with recruiting. So how many of you have recruiting departments out there that are about, to pull their hair out because it's such a stressful job? Probably one of the toughest jobs in America right now. So when you've got employees that are really engaged in the work that they're doing, they're actually becoming brand ambassadors for your company, helping to bring other really good talent into the organization. And then the impacts don't stop there, because what also happens is that starts to reduce overall turnover costs, right? It helps with hiring practices and helps with finding the right people for the right fit in the organization. And that's going to be really important too, because as you kind of see on this slide in front of you now, a recent poll from Leadership IQ shows that employees are 135% more engaged when their companies hire people who fit the company values and culture. All right, so when people are hired who fit in with the company values and culture, they are 135% more engaged. The kicker is only 20% of the current workforce says the new hires that companies are making actually fit well with company values. And so I know that it's a challenge out there for a lot of organizations finding people to fill positions. But what we also might be doing as we, make exceptions just to get bodies in seats is we could be possibly creating a longer term issue when it comes to employee engagement, because if they don't fit in, we have to think about what that's doing to the rest of the culture and the rest of the employees within the organization. So, I think we can debate the problem all day long, but I feel like I had a client come to me a few weeks ago and said, I've got a lot of employees that are just not engaged in the work that they're doing. I'm thinking about just getting rid of all of them and starting fresh. And we kind of talked through that. And, what I said to this person is, I don't know that employee engagement is something that you can do by hiring new blood into an organization. In many ways, I think, I think what you have to do here is you have to engage with the employees that you already have, and you have to kind of work from the inside out. And we have a lot of work to do here, right? Only 3 in 10 employees actually agree that they have the tools necessary and the materials that they need to do their jobs in the right way. And 4 in 10 say they actually have the opportunity to do what they do best every single day. And then a little less than a third, about 30%, say they've actually gotten recognition for doing good work within the last week, right? So you can imagine that, if you're in the majority of any of these positions, what it must feel like to walk into a place where they don't have what they need to do the good work that they might want to do, or have the opportunity to do the things that they do best every single day. That could be pretty discouraging. Now, I'm not saying we have to make exceptions for every single employee based on, this wish list of things that they want. But I'm saying we need to do a better job of really listening to what the workforce is saying to us, so that we can maybe start to bridge this gap just a little bit more. So that brings us to, how do you measure engagement? And I've spent a whole lot of time thinking about this. How do you get to a place where you have an engaged team, an engaged workforce? How do you measure that employee engagement? And, this might come as a shock from somebody who is a consultant. And before I say it, let me preface it by saying I'm a huge fan of data. But when it comes to measuring employee engagement, I think data only tells part of the story. Surveys are great, do them, collect data. But to really understand what is happening in your organization, you have to peel back the layers of the onion, and you have to get underneath what the numbers are saying or what the trends are saying. You have to take it a little bit further. And to do that, what I think needs to happen is, you have to talk to employees. That might look like doing focus group, more skip level type meetings, create task forces. We need to be more intentional about talking to employees, because that's the data that we really need. Real voices in the room that help us understand what's really being said. And if we're guessing based on things that we're seeing in spreadsheets based on surveys, if we're guessing what we think needs to happen, we're treading into some really dangerous territory, I think. I've heard from a lot of clients that I work with, they take the surveys, but that organizations are sending out. But when it comes down to it, they're saying, we still don't feel like we're really being heard in these surveys, right? When do I actually get to use my voice? I've been trying to, but it feels or sounds like it maybe is falling on deaf ears. So instead of focusing on, how to get people engaged through surveys, right? Instead of focusing on what's causing people to leave our companies, maybe we need to be focusing more on what are the things that we should be doing in order to help make people want to stay, right? Connecting those things to company values, connecting them to, maybe reward systems. Also maybe, sometimes those come out in stay interviews, right? But when you conduct a stay interview, the most important piece of that are the questions that you're asking. And maybe not even the questions that you're asking, but it's the responses that you're eliciting from those types of surveys, right? Looking for those themes and patterns, getting the real voices in the room. So that brings us to the magic bean. And remember when I said that I plan to share what I think is the main solution to employee engagement in one word? Well, here it is, that one word. And that one word is coaching. Now, you could say that maybe I'm a little bit biased, and that might be true. I'm an executive coach. I believe in coaching for a lot of different reasons, but coaching is the thing right now that, is more than any other time in history. Coaching is having this lasting and inspirational impact on our employees and our workforces. It's the thing that right now we're seeing is actually working. In my work, I have seen, that coaching more than anything else can really have a positive impact on the way that employees are engaging with their organizations. I have seen and worked with clients that when they, when I started working with them, they had one foot or maybe even both feet out the door at that point, right? They were ready to move on to something different. And once we kind of dug into it, got a little bit below the surface, what we realized is it wasn't necessarily another job that was going to fix anything, but it was maybe taking some actions and responsibility on their own part to get more of what it is that they needed and they wanted from their work environment. Now, with that, I also know that not every company can afford a coach for every employee. And I understand that. And I'm not saying that you need to hire a coach for every employee. But what if I told you that you may already have those coaches on payroll? If your leaders right now aren't already effective coaches, and I'm not talking about practicing, coaching every other day or jumping into coaching mode when it feels like the right thing to do. I am talking about living, breathing coaching culture. And if your leaders are not living and breathing coaching culture, I mean, doing more coaching on a daily basis than, handing out orders or doing employee reviews. What I think, and this is my opinion, but also based on data that I'm going to share with you too, I think that we are wasting and burning out top talent, and we may never be able to get some of that talent back. Not to mention throwing away a lot of money, because it's also a huge expense, as many of you know, when you have so much turnover and you're having to bring people into the organization. So my point is this: coaching is a thing that works. I've seen it. There are tons of research projects going on right now where we're gathering even more data about exactly how it is working. But the thing is, most leaders don't really have the skills that they need in order to coach employees effectively. If they did, it's very possible that we may not even need to be here for this kind of conversation about employee engagement. So it's not their fault, right? I think back to, when I was, at university, and, I first went to university to go to journalism school, went back then again to study psychology. But, in none of those classes did I ever take a class that really taught me how to be a good leader. It's something that I had to kind of figure out on my own, right? You're kind of triaging as you go. We all know what that's like. So it's not our manager's fault that we're not there, but it is our responsibility as leaders today, I think, to make sure that we're teaching our leaders to be really good coaches. I really do believe that at this point, it's a huge responsibility. So let's talk a little bit about, this isn't some pie in the sky idea that I kind of dreamt up. There's some data and some research that I'm going to help you back this up with, right? We know that the best way to combat engagement crisis is by creating coaching cultures. In fact, this was part of a research project that was happening, even before the pandemic started, in a study from the International Coaching Federation and HCI. The study was called "Building a Coaching Culture for Increased Employee Engagement." And what that study found is that 60% of employees rated themselves as highly engaged when they worked in organizations with strong coaching cultures. Now, that's opposed to the 48% in organizations without. So in strong coaching cultures, 60% of highly engaged employees said that they have managers or leaders who were stepping into really important coaching roles for them. The other 48% that were not in organizations that had managers with good coaching skills. I know 12% isn't a whole lot, but think about what 12% might mean to your company, right? What does it mean to your bottom line? So that's from the International Coaching Federation, Building a Coaching Culture for Increased Employee Engagement. Here's another one. So that exact same study shows that coaching is especially impactful among high potential employees. So organizations that offer high potential employees access to managers or leaders using coaching skills actually reported engagement increases of up to 59%. Now, notice I didn't say organizations that hired expensive executive coaches for their employees. Now, that's a possibility too. And there's nothing wrong with hiring an executive coach, but I understand what kind of economy we're in today. We're all watching the bottom line. What I was saying is high potential employees that have access to leaders and managers that use coaching skills had a 59% increase in employee engagement. This is compelling evidence of how coaching is substantially impacting organizational results. I see it kind of on a meta level every single day when I work with clients on a one-on-one basis. I've recently started working with leaders to teach them the same coaching skills that I'm using every day to work with the higher level executives. And I'm seeing these things turn around before my very eyes. And these people, I'm investing an hour with them, right? They're investing an hour in themselves whenever they're going through coaching. So it's not like this thing that's going to take up all this time, right? Once you develop these coaching skills, they're going to stay with you forever. You're going to be able to use them, no matter where you are, no matter where you work, even in your personal life, right? So compelling evidence on how coaching is really substantially changing and impacting organizational results. And that's just the half of it. Because another study shows that 80% of people who receive coaching report increased self-confidence. 70% say they benefit from improved work performance, improved relationships, and even more effective communication skills. So here's why that's important. Whenever I am working with an organization on employee engagement, or I'm working with somebody who has admittedly maybe disengaged from the work that they're doing, usually within their top 5 list of the things that are getting in their way are self-confidence issues, poor communication within the organization, poor relationships at their work or with their managers even. And then obviously that's gonna lead to poor work performance, right? When you don't feel connected to other people, when you don't feel like you know exactly what's going on within your organization. Think about what that feels like. It can feel very, very lonely. So it's no wonder that the workforce is starting to disengage, right? Like I said, and some of these things are things that the organization might need to be responsible for. A lot of these things are just people are dealing with life as well. And I think a coaching culture can solve for each of those things, right? And we'll talk about what that looks like as we continue to kind of talk through this topic. So here's why coaching works. It is a self-sustainable model, right? It's not something where you have to have a consultant come in every month and tweak a process. Coaching builds on itself, right? Once you have the skills, they're never going anywhere. And the more that you have leaders in your organization, even people who are not leaders in your organization that are adopting a coaching culture, the better they're going to get at it. So, if leaders in your organization can really master the skills that I'm going to pop up here on your screen: listening, don't tell, compel, empathy, creating clarity, inspiring accountability, these 5 skills, I'm willing to bet you that within a pretty short amount of time, you're going to start to see your employees respond, right? And like I said, there's data that supports this. So, coaching is based on, it's very based on positive psychology. So instead of focusing on what's wrong, coaching really focuses on what's right? Instead of focusing on what we don't have, coaching focuses on what we do have. It's a simple change in perspective or change in mindset that can make a world of difference when you're talking with somebody who is, not feeling like the world is hearing them in any moment. So as I go through each one of these, we'll talk about what it sounds like and how this maybe looks like as well. All right. So the first one that we'll talk about is listening. And this is really important. And when I put this up, I'll often have people say, okay, so we're paying you to come in and tell us that we need to be better listeners. And, I'll say something like this. I'll say, good coaches understand what I like to call 5-finger management. So do this with me. I know that I can't see you because you're not on camera, but do this with me. All right, here's what 5-finger management is if you don't already know what it is. Take your hand, put it up in the air, looks like this. Pull all those fingers in towards each other, like that. Now, this is the most important part, and you have to do it exactly like I showed. Place it firmly over your mouth. That's 5-finger management. We think that we are being really good listeners. But if we were, I think I would argue that a lot of the engagement issues that we're seeing in our workforce right now may not exist. Our employees have been trying to tell us for a while now that there are things that they need that they're not getting. And I know that we hear them, right? We're listening, but we're not hearing them the way that they need to be heard. I was just reading some research last night that shows, when it comes to patients talking to their doctors about serious health issues, that a doctor will let a patient talk for about 12 seconds before they jump in and think that they kind of have it all figured out, right? Even if it only took the patient 30 seconds to explain what they're experiencing or what some of the symptoms are, doctors give them 12 seconds before they jump in, right? And that's a big thing that's happening in our healthcare industry right now. Like, our physicians are not even listening to us, but it's also happening within the walls of our own organizations, right? So, so much gets in the way. I get it. I've worked in corporate for so long. We're busy. There's email that's popping into our boxes all the time. We have text messages and Zoom meetings and Teams messages that pop up while we're in the middle of other meetings. But those things are getting in the way of us really hearing what the workforce needs us to hear from them. So what do your employees need to hear from you? What do you need to hear from them? What do they need to do their jobs? Do they know what they need to do their job? Do they really understand what's expected of them at work? Do they feel heard? And if not, what does it mean for them to really feel heard? Do they feel like their opinions are mattering? Do they think that they are doing a good job? And what do they wish that they could do more of in their role? What support do they need from their managers? What are they getting from their manager that's not helpful? Right? We need to be on a listening tour. I don't know if you know this woman, but she has an amazing story. Betty Bagombe. She grew up in Uganda with nothing. She walked, from a small child 4 miles every single day until she was an adult to attend school. 4 miles there and 4 miles back, so 8 miles a day. She lived on one meal a day because it's all that her family could afford. Growing up as a child, she lived in a communal home with her uncle who had 8 wives and was abusive. But now she's an elected member of the Ugandan parliament. And the reason that I want you to know about this woman is Adam Grant tells her story in his book, Think Again, about how in the 90s, Betty single-handedly went up against one of Uganda's most dangerous warlords, when nobody else would, by the way, with one goal: to try to make peace. Now, this warlord was a brutal man. He was accused of murdering over 100,000 people, abducting 30,000 children, displacing millions and millions of Ugandans because of violence and, all of that stuff. And Betty had seen enough of that. And so she goes to the Ugandan president and convinces him to send her in to see if she could help stop the violence. And reluctantly, the Ugandan president agrees. And he doesn't send Betty with this big entourage of people or security detail. In most cases, it was just her. And actually getting to this man, right, this brutal warlord, was not an easy task. When she, he was very, very well protected. very well protected and was always in hiding. And after months and months of effort, she was actually able to make contact with the rebels that were in the inner circle for this guy. It took months, close to a year, I think. And once she actually did get contact with these rebels, when they realized that she was a woman and was going to try to negotiate peace, they were insulted at the idea. But even though that they were insulted, she negotiated her way finally into a meeting with the warlord himself. And after a few conversations with this man, right? Remember, he had been accused of murdering millions, kidnapping thousands and thousands of children. After just a few conversations, this man started referring to Betty as Mummy. And after a few more conversations, even agreed to leave the jungle to start peace talks with the Ugandan government. Now, even though the peace talks eventually kind of fell through, they didn't succeed. Just getting to that point was this huge accomplishment that nobody up until Betty came along was able to achieve. So when she was asked how she got through to the warlord, Betty explained that her goal was not to persuade or even coax. Her secret was she just simply listened, which was different than what other people were doing. Other peacekeepers, when they came in, they had, ordered them to stop fighting. They were preaching about their own plans for conflict resolution and, prosecuted the past efforts that had all failed. But Betty comes in and she's not telling them what to do. She just sat patiently and listened, sometimes for hours, to them speak, taking notes, sometimes asking questions. She would tell them, if you want to call me names, call me names. If you want me to leave, then I will. And that's how she was able to engage with the murderous warlord by just listening. Adam Grant also writes in his book, listening well is more than just a matter of talking less. It's a set of skills in asking and responding. It starts with showing more interest in other people, and more interest in other people's interests, rather than trying to judge their status or prove our own status. We can all get better about being truly curious, about asking good questions with no hidden agenda, not trying to be fixers, not trying to be savers, not trying to convince other people of what we are convinced of, or try to correct other people of what we think may be wrong. It's just listening to what their perspective is to create some common ground. So my question for you is, how are you listening? How are your leaders listening? So the next one is, so that's the first piece of coaching, listening. The next piece is don't tell, compel. And before I kind of jump into this, I'm going to ask you to just put one word in chat, right? You don't even have to think about it too much, but do you work in a culture that is more likely to instruct or inspire employees? Just type one word, either instruct or inspire. We're not going to be sharing any of this. We're not going to be, sending it back to your organizations, but instruct or inspire. And as I see these coming in, overwhelmingly, it looks like many of you are working in organizations that have leaders that are instructing. And it's not their fault. They may not know a difference. All right? But coaching is not telling. We already know this. Coaching is about phrasing goals in a way that drives actions. Think about that. Phrasing goals or tasks in a way that inspires action. So, this may sound something like, tying a goal to a bigger picture company goal or value. Or it might mean asking the employee to connect the dots for themselves, right? Remember, in coaching, we assume that the people we're coaching have the answers, and they do. If they don't, they probably know where to find them. So that can also sound like, tell me, what does success look like with this goal? How can you benefit from reaching the goal? how do you think your organization is going to benefit from you reaching the goal? So we didn't make it about the organization reaching the goal. We made it about the employee reaching the goal and then how that's going to impact the organization, right? If you've ever studied even kind of basic human motivation, there is a theory called self-determination theory, which is something that is used in motivation, which says that the three main ingredients to the recipe of motivation is autonomy, which means feeling like you're part of something that's bigger than you. Connectedness, meaning you're not alone, that you feel connected to other people, that they're not going to let you, they'll bring you up when you are feeling down, that you have a place to go that's safe to talk about the things that you're worried about or dealing with. And then the last one is competence, right? That we're being trusted to do the work and the jobs that we're being paid to do, right? That people trust us to do what we're here to do. And it's all about motivating ourselves, right? Think about when you were a kid and your mom said, you got advice from your mother saying, oh, you really need to play summer, baseball, right? It doesn't sound like a great idea when your mom's telling you about it, but when it's your idea to play summer baseball, it's probably a really good idea. That's what coaching does. Coaching is all about what their ideas are, right? Which engages them, inspires them to want to do more. So, asking questions like, how confident are you in your, that you're going to be able to achieve this on a scale of 1 to 10? If they say 5, ask what a 6 would look like, right? So we don't have to jump from, confidence level of 5 to 10. We can take baby steps. If you're a 5 on that confidence scale of being able to achieve the goal that we're talking about today, what would it look like to be at a 6? And what is 1 or 2 steps that you could do to get to the 6? Right? So we can help them take baby steps by asking really good, smart questions. All right. Just keeping an eye on the time here. I love this picture. I know that it's not a very good quality, and I apologize for that, but I just love it so much because when you think about empathy, I think that empathy really should be a bridge that connects all of us to each other, and then all of us to an organization. There was an article in Forbes that I was reading a couple of weeks ago that says, when talking about empathy in the workplace, it explained, when a manager is being a coach, they understand where you're coming from because that's where every team member begins their own journey from their own understanding and their own point of view. And it's right. The first moment that somebody tries to cram their point of view down your throat, what is your reaction? Or the first moment that somebody tells you that, the way that they think you should go about doing a thing, how does that make you feel? Probably not very inspired or motivated, right? If somebody's just going to tell you what to do, what's the point in you even being there? So then you start to see the decline in engagement, right? It pulls us away from the work that we do. So we try so hard because it's not always, from ill intent, right? We try so hard to make things make sense for our employees, which is a noble thing, it really is. But when we try too hard, we miss the point to let our employees share what's really happening in their own heads and their own hearts. Sometimes they don't even need to do anything. Sometimes empathy is just about listening, right? It's not about solving a problem. For me, when I was grieving for the loss of my grandmother and both of my parents, I didn't need anybody to tell me that it was going to be okay. I had a lot of people trying to tell me what I needed to do to get over grief, right? Do a purge, get out and talk to people, try to get back to a normal life. I didn't know what normal was at that point. And not to mention, we're in the middle of a pandemic still. What I needed, which is what worked for me, is just somebody to listen to me. That's what made sense for me. It's when I could just feel heard because I had all these things bouncing around in my head. And it may not be grief for your employees, but it could be something else, right? It could be, I don't feel confident in the work that I'm doing. I thought I was good at it, but I don't feel very good at it right now. So asking questions like, hey, this seems like a big challenge. How do you see it? What are you thinking about it? Or, how does it make you feel? What thoughts, does it bring up for you when you think about this challenge? So ask questions, like help me see what you see. When you ask these types of questions, it's creating connections from the employee to the manager and from the employee to the organization. You're letting them use their voice, you're hearing them, and you're supporting them. That gets us to creating clarity. I think this is so important because employees are getting lost when they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And whether you believe it or not, a lot of the people who are working in our organizations right now, we think that they know what they're supposed to be doing, but they're faking it because they don't feel maybe safe enough to admit that they don't. They don't want to maybe, feel like their boss doesn't think that they have all the right answers, right? There are a lot of things that are happening maybe for the employee. And they're getting lost when they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, or when we haven't done a good enough job of clarifying what we want or need from them. And that's not happening good either. We're doing the best we can, but there's one critical piece missing, which is the coaching aspect, right? Now that we've talked about this and I've shared, what I need from you, I'd like to hear what have you heard, right? What do you think you need to be doing? So when that happens, sometimes employees are getting lucky and they're able to kind of fake their way through it until they figure it out on their own. Most of the time they don't. And when they get something wrong, what happens? We have to go to them and we have to call them into the office for one of those difficult conversations that we're uncomfortable with as managers too. But then think about what it makes the employee feel like, right? To feel like, again, they're not good enough, or those thoughts that they were having about their own confidence, that's just being reinforced, right? It's pulling their confidence down even more. So at some point they just give up, and we see that in research. Remember what I said about 16% of employees are being actively disengaged? A lot of times this is why, because they don't have a clear understanding of what it is that they should be doing. So, a person I was recently coaching said to me, I don't know what my boss wants from me, Jacob. Everything I do seems to be wrong, and I can't figure out what I need to do to get it right. I'm done. I'm going somewhere else. So if an employee isn't getting something and we try to explain it to them and it's not working, we have to change the tactic, right? Empower them to lead themselves to clarity, right? Don't try to lead them there. We don't know what they need or how they can get there. Let them get themselves there by asking the right types of questions. So creating clarity is not about giving direction or knowing what the person doesn't understand. Creating clarity is about helping the employee see what they already have that could help them find the pieces that are missing for them, and not assuming that we know what the pieces are. So coaching is not about us creating clarity for them. Coaching is about them finding clarity in their own way, on their own time. It could sound something like, what are you already good at that could help you figure out, the thing that you want to know? On a scale of 1 to 10, how clear are you about what your goals are for this team? What could help you get more clear on that, right? And then finally, inspiring accountability. And this is also super important. Good coaches know how to inspire accountability. Have you ever gotten, a does not meet expectations on your evaluation? How does that feel, right? Those are the things that open the doors to disengagement for employees, right? I'm not saying that it has to, but when you get a do not meet expectations, it's demotivating. It makes you want to check out. But skilled coaches know how to inspire accountability. They know how to focus on getting agreements, getting mutual buy-in, which is the secret to top-down expectations. Expectations are often unspoken, unmet, and most of the time completely unclear. And without agreement, expectations are nothing more than direction, which means that we're going back into that mode of instructing, which is not doing the trick instead of inspiring, right? It's giving direction is old school command and control orders, Nothing inspiring about it at all. So instead of instruction, a good coach can work with an employee to create accountability, an atmosphere of ownership. Think about that for a second. Employees that actually feel ownership about the work that they're doing. Imagine that. And ownership is the lifeblood of employee engagement. Makes them feel part of something that matters. That's important. Makes them feel good at what they do. My favorite question when I'm coaching somebody, when we get to the part about accountability, is, what could you do to hold yourself accountable? Instead of telling them what I might do as their manager, as their coach, right? What could you do to hold yourself accountable? What would that look like? And then what role would you like for me to play in that? Right? I'm here to support you. I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll support you. How can I best support you in holding yourself accountable? So when people feel supported, they're more likely to engage with the work that they're doing. That worked out pretty good. I made it through all the points, which I was a little bit worried about. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that come up for you, or if you have other things that you want to say too. So yeah, shoot.
Well, first of all, Jakin, thank you so much for sharing your insight today with us. I think we've all got some great nuggets to take back with us. And one of our first questions is, you've offered a lot of ideas today. If an organization only has the bandwidth to make one change to improve employee engagement, what would it be?
It's a really good question. I think if you could make one change, it's train your managers to be coaches. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do this, but train them to be good coaches. This solves a lot more, in the problem area than just employee engagement. It actually lowers turnover rates, makes people feel, like I said, more confident in the work that they're doing. So give them the coaching skills that they really need and want. And, if you need help with that, even where to start, feel free to reach out to me or to Partners International, and we can also help you with that.
Great. Does anyone else have more questions for Jakin? I had one question. Well, people might be coming with us. You talked a little bit about being truly curious. I like when you're sharing that story. And where do you think that starts, or how can people get their lens or their mindset that way?
It's a great question. I think that we have fallen into this really bad habit of, when we're trying to be curious, we're only half listening, because we're trying to, as we're listening to somebody, think about what it is that we're going to say in response to what it is that they're telling us. And, as a coach, I try really, really hard to not even think about what I'm going to say or ask next until after the person has stopped talking. I mean, it goes back to what we talked about in the research about the doctors only listening to their patients for 12 seconds, even if, it takes the patient 29 seconds or 30 seconds to explain what, symptoms they're having. Because if we're jumping to conclusions, if we think we know where their questions are headed, we might miss something critically important that would change the way that we might respond. So just listen. Don't try to guess where they're going. Don't try to have the answer right away. There are a lot of times when I'm coaching, I don't know what question I'm going to ask my client next until they've stopped talking. And even then, I might take 10 seconds to really think about what they've just said to me and think about the question that I'm going to ask. So I think, that real curiosity starts with us just being really, really good listeners.
That makes perfect sense. Let's just see if anyone else has any more questions for Jakin. And we're thanking all our sponsors. So yes, thank you to all our sponsors who make these webinars possible to be free for our members. And well, I'll give it another second or two. Just see if anything pops up. All right, well, if anyone has any final questions, please let us know at C2HR and we can share those with Jakin. We would want to thank all our sponsors for today's webinar, and we also encourage all of you to go to our website, c2hr.com, and it just popped up here in the chat, for our conference that's coming up on August 9th through the 11th. Thank you everyone for your time today. We love being able to connect with our community, and thank you, Jakin and Partners International, for making today's webinar possible. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon.